She circled the error in red, wrote 3 words in the margin, "Not approved, resubmit," and slid the folder back across the desk. The man across from her didn't pick it up. Neither did the 2 men standing behind him. Nobody in the 4th-floor boardroom of the Pennant Hotel moved. Fern Duchamp had been the property's head bookkeeper for 4 years. In that time, she had processed thousands of documents, corrected hundreds of errors, and developed a finely calibrated sense for when a number had been placed where it had no natural reason to be. The quarterly summary in front of her contained 11 of those numbers. She had circled 4, which felt like a reasonable mercy. "Messieurs Duchamp." The man across from her, Gareth something, she'd already forgotten the last name, had the particular tone of someone accustomed to delivering instructions rather than receiving corrections. These figures were approved at the regional level. By whom? A pause. By people with authority over this file. Fern folded her hands on the desk. She was 31 years old, wore reading glasses she hadn't yet, admitted she needed full time, and was several sizes larger than the tailored suits the men across from her clearly considered standard professional armor. None of that mattered to her. What mattered was that column 7 didn't reconcile with column 3, and the depreciation schedule on the Eastern Annex had been adjusted in a way that was either an honest mistake or something considerably less honest. "Then they can resubmit it correctly," she said. "I'll need the source documentation for these 4-line items before I can sign anything." Gareth leaned forward slightly. "Mr. Slade expects this finalized by end of day." Fern had heard the name before. Everyone in Toronto had heard the name. Crispin Slade's legitimate holdings included commercial real estate, a shipping company, 2 hotel groups, and a private equity firm that seemed to acquire distressed assets with suspicious efficiency. What the newspapers said about his other interests, they said carefully, in conditional language, with teams of lawyers, presumably reading every draft. She knew all of this. She still didn't move. Mr. Slade can expect it correctly filed or not filed at all. Those are the options I have for him. He arrived the following morning at 7:43, which she knew because her office had a clear sightline to the lobby, and she saw him come through the glass entrance. Crispin Slade was 42, dark-haired, and possessed the kind of stillness that certain very powerful men cultivate until it becomes indistinguishable from threat. He wore a grey overcoat and carried nothing, which meant other people were carrying things for him. 2 of them followed at a respectful distance. Fern had the corrected file open on her desk when he knocked once and opened her door without waiting. She looked at him over her glasses. "You could have sent the resubmission by courier." "I could have." He sat down in the chair across from her without being invited. "Walk me through the 4 items." She did, professionally, precisely, without apology. The depreciation adjustment was almost certainly the work of someone who understood accounting well enough to manipulate it, and not quite well enough to do it without leaving traces. The other 3 were cleaner, but still wrong. Crispin listened. He didn't interrupt, which she hadn't expected. When she finished, he said, "No one else flagged this." I noticed. "In how long?" She glanced at the timestamp on her notes. "About 12 minutes. Something shifted in his expression. Not warmth, exactly. More like the adjustment a person makes when they encounter something they hadn't accounted for. "Those figures have been formatted that way for 2 years. Fern looked at him. "I've been here 4 years. "And you're only seeing this now?" "I'm seeing it now because someone submitted it for my signature. I don't review documents I haven't been asked to touch." She paused. "Would you like me to look at the previous 2 years?" He was quiet for a moment. "Yes." She pulled up the archived files. It took her 22 minutes to find the pattern. A consistent, fractional underreporting in one specific revenue category, small enough to miss in isolation, unmistakable, across 8 consecutive quarters. Not a mistake. A method. She turned her monitor so he could see it. Crispin Slade looked at the screen for a long time. His face revealed almost nothing. Finally, he said, "Who had access to this account?" "I can give you a list." "Do that." She printed it. He stood, took the list, and picked up the incorrectly filed quarterly summary from the edge of her desk. "I'll have the corrected version to you by noon. I'll need the source documents as well." "You'll have them." He was already at the door. He stopped, turned back. "Messieurs Duchamp, the error you found, you're certain of it?" Fern had been certain the moment she'd seen it. Yes. He left without another word. The corrected file arrived at 11:58. It was accurate. She signed it and filed it. 3 days later, Crispin Slade returned to her office with another folder. He sat down across from her desk, placed it in front of her, and said nothing. She opened it. Monthly variance report for the hotel's West Wing renovation account. She checked the figures against her internal records, cross-referenced the contractor invoices, and reviewed the payment schedule. It took her 9 minutes. "It's fine," she said. "Check the holdback calculation." She checked it. "It's fine." He tilted his head slightly. "The provisional tax gross up is correctly applied." She closed the folder and pushed it back across the desk. "There's nothing wrong with this submission." His expression remained neutral. "I needed to confirm." Fern looked at him over her glasses. Then she opened her desk drawer, took out a standard fee schedule, and placed it on top of the folder. Crispin looked at the paper. "What is this?" "Document review surcharge. I apply it to any submission that requires professional time without a billable correction." She capped her pen. $250, payable to the penance administration account. One of the men standing near the door. The same quiet, broad-shouldered type who always seemed to appear when Crispin Slade did, made a sound that might have been a cough. Crispin looked at the fee schedule for a moment. Then he reached into his jacket and produced a card. "Bill it." He left. She filed the folder under reviewed, no corrections required, which was a category she had never needed before. The submissions kept coming. Not constantly. Crispin wasn't obvious about it, but with a regularity that Fern, who was professionally attuned to patterns, could not ignore. A lease renewal reconciliation that was perfectly in order. A payroll audit she completed in 20 minutes without finding a single discrepancy. A capital expenditure summary so cleanly prepared that she suspected someone had gone to considerable effort to ensure there was absolutely nothing wrong with it. Each time she applied the surcharge, each time he paid without argument. By the 4th visit, her assistant had begun straightening the small meeting chairs in her office in the 10 minutes before his expected arrival, which Fern noticed and said nothing about, because she had begun straightening her own desk first. It was during the 5th visit, a foreign exchange reconciliation with a minor rounding variance, she caught and corrected in 8 minutes, that Warren Bright appeared. Warren was a forensic accountant contracted to the hotel for a separate engagement. He was good at his job, polite in a relaxed way that didn't require effort, and had taken to stopping by Fern's office in the afternoons with coffee, from the cart in the lobby. He knew her order, hazelnut flat white, extra shot, and he brought it correctly every time, which she appreciated in the uncomplicated way she appreciated accurate ledgers. He knocked on the open door, saw Crispin sitting across from her, and paused. "Sorry, I can come back." Crispin didn't turn around. He was watching Fern. "You're fine," Fern said. "We're almost done." Warren entered and set the coffee on the corner of her desk. Fern signed the corrected variance report without looking up. She could feel Crispin looking at Warren. Warren looked back, recognized the face after a moment, and gave a composed nod. Crispin returned it. Then he looked at the coffee cup. "Is that your usual?" he asked Fern. She glanced at the cup. Yes. Warren said he'd see her tomorrow, and left. Crispin picked up the signed variance report. He did not immediately stand. "He brings you coffee." "He's a colleague." "He knew your order." "He pays attention." Fern slid the surcharge sheet across the desk. $2.50. Crispin looked at it without picking it up. "Did you know him before this engagement?" "No." She folded her hands. "Mr. Slade, is there something else about the reconciliation you'd like to discuss?" There was not. He paid the surcharge and left. 4 days later, a coffee appeared on her desk that she hadn't ordered. The cup bore the logo of a private club on King Street West that she had walked past but never entered, because its membership cost approximately what she earned in 3 months. She read the receipt attached to the sleeve. She set it down. She looked up at Crispin Slade, who was sitting across from her with his hands folded, watching her read. "This is from the Meridian Club," she said. "Yes." Warren's coffee costs $4.80. Crispin straightened slightly. "This one is better." Those are not the same thing as a justification. Something appeared at the edge of his mouth. Not quite a smile. Close enough that Fern's chest did something she chose not to examine. She reached for the surcharge sheet. "You didn't bring a file today." "No." She wrote the amount. "Then this is a general professional time surcharge." She slid it across the desk. $250. He paid. He was back the following week. The gala was the hotel's annual charitable event, a property-wide affair that Fern attended in her capacity as a financial representative. She wore a deep burgundy dress she'd bought 2 years ago and rarely had occasion for, and she arrived alone, because she always arrived alone, which had never bothered her. A woman named Celia Rourke found her near a display of silent auction items. Celia was Crispin's senior director of corporate strategy, elegant in the effortless way that usually required considerable effort, and she greeted Fern with the warmth of someone performing warmth rather than feeling it. "Messieurs Duchamp, we've all heard so much about you. Crispin speaks very highly of his accountant." Fern smiled politely. "I'm the head of accounts at the Pennant." "Of course." Celia had already turned toward a cluster of investors nearby. "There's been quite a bit of internal discussion about consolidating your function into Slade Enterprises directly. Full integration, senior title, better resources." Fern stopped. Celia addressed the investors smoothly. "The Pennant portfolio reconciliations will soon be centralized under our own team, led by Ms. Duchamp, who has been absolutely invaluable to the group." The investors turned toward Fern. One congratulated her. Another said what an extraordinary opportunity. A woman touched her arm and told her she must be very pleased to have Crispin's confidence behind her. Fern was not pleased. She felt something considerably colder than pleased and considerably more focused. She looked across the room and found Crispin immediately. He was watching Celia with the stillness she had learned to recognize as something other than composure. "Did you authorize this?" Fern asked, clearly, loud enough for the nearby cluster to fall quiet. Crispin crossed the room. "No." One word, the room heard it. Fern turned back to Celia. "My name is Fern Duchamp. I am the head of accounts at the Pennant Hotel. That department exists because I built it. The work discussed here tonight came from my office and my team, not from any association with this group." She kept her voice level. "If anyone wishes to discuss my professional future, they discuss it with me first, before mentioning it to anyone else in any room." Celia's smile became a structural thing, holding its shape without any particular feeling behind it. Fern turned to the investors. "I'm happy to speak to any of you directly about the reconciliation work. You'll find my contact information with the hotel's representative team." Then Crispin stepped forward. not in front of her. Beside her, 1 inch of difference that was, in practice, everything. There are no authorized discussions regarding any employment arrangement with Miss Duchamp, he said. Quiet, absolute. No representative, advisor, or division under my direction has any standing to speak to her professional future without her direct involvement. That is now understood by everyone in this room. He didn't threaten Celia. He didn't need to. He simply removed every possible interpretation except the correct one. Later, as the crowd redistributed itself toward the bar, Fern stood near a window overlooking the harbor. Crispin came to stand nearby, leaving careful distance between them. I didn't direct her to say any of that. I know. He was quiet. You would have been well compensated. It wasn't about compensation. She looked at him. Inside this hotel, I know exactly who I am. Out there, after tonight, I'm Crispin Slade's accountant. That's not the same thing. No, he said, it isn't. She went home that night without anger. She went home carrying something harder to name and considerably harder to put down. She asked for space. He gave it to her immediately and entirely. His files stopped arriving. The Meridian Club coffee stopped appearing on her desk. The bi-weekly surcharge receipts stopped accumulating in her folder. His name disappeared from her appointment calendar. Her office was objectively quieter. She told herself this was what she had asked for. She reviewed the hotel's standard accounts and found them uneventful. She had coffee with Warren twice. He was thoughtful and easy to be around and asked good questions about her work. He did not sit across from her desk for 40 minutes manufacturing reasons to stay. At the end of the second week, she caught herself looking up every time someone knocked on her open door. By the third week, she was aware, without telling anyone, that the surcharge folder on her desk had not been opened in 19 days, and that she was counting. Warren asked her to dinner on a Tuesday. Not casually. A real question, clearly put. She said she needed a few days. He said, of course, and smiled, and left without making it complicated. She sat at her desk after he'd gone, and looked at the harbor through her window for a long time. She thought about a man who had paid $250, repeatedly, and without complaint, for the privilege of sitting in a chair with nothing to correct. She thought about a cup of coffee that cost $12, and was introduced as a superior alternative, with the particular expression of someone who knew how absurd that sounded, and had decided it was worth saying anyway. She told Daniel she needed a little more time. He said, of course. Crispin came back on a Thursday. No advance notice. No folder forwarded by courier. He knocked once, opened her door, and Fern was already at her desk with her second coffee and her reading glasses on, finishing a sentence in the quarterly notes, and she did not look up immediately because she didn't break concentration for anyone. When she looked up, Crispin Slade was standing in the doorway, holding a single folder. She said, "You could have couriered it." He sat down. He placed the folder in front of her. She opened it. Consolidated annual review for the Pennant's entire accounts portfolio. She checked the revenue reconciliations. Correct. She checked the capital allocation schedule. Correct. She cross-referenced 3 months of variance reports against her own internal records. Not single discrepancy, not one rounding error, not one provisional adjustment out of place. She reviewed the depreciation tables, the holdback calculations, the foreign exchange figures, the gross-up schedules. 248 pages. Perfect. She closed the folder. There's nothing wrong with this. I know. She took off her glasses. You prepared a complete annual portfolio review with nothing for me to correct. Yes. She looked at him steadily. Mr. Slade, you can acquire a distressed asset portfolio from a standing start in 48 hours. This was the best approach you could find. He held her gaze. Apparently, it's a recurring limitation in your specific case. She waited. The first time I came back, he said, it was because you found something no one had found in 2 years. He paused. The second time, I thought there might be something else I'd missed. There wasn't. No. He was quiet for a moment. After the third time, I was aware of that. Fern said nothing. The coffee was not subtle, he said. I recognize that. You paid $12 to compete with a $4 hazelnut latte. It was objectively superior. You were jealous of my colleague's order history. He did not deny it. Something about the way he didn't deny it made it worse, or better, depending on how she looked at it. I didn't ask you directly, he said, because I wasn't certain you'd say yes. Outside, the harbor was flat and silver in the late morning light. Somewhere below in the lobby, the elevator chimed, and someone's heels crossed the marble floor, and a door opened briefly onto the sound of the city before it closed again. Fern reached for her pen. She wrote the surcharge, $250, reviewed, no corrections required, and slid it across the desk. Crispin looked at it. For 248 pages of accurate work. For making me read all of them. She recapped the pen, then she looked up. Dinner. He went very still. That wasn't a question, she said. But I can make it one, if that's easier. He took a breath. For the first time in any conversation she'd had with him, he looked like a man who was not entirely certain what was about to happen next. Dinner? Yes, Fern said. He picked up the surcharge sheet. He paid it without looking away from her. She filed it under reviewed, no correction required, same as always. The folder stayed on her desk for the rest of the afternoon. She had read all 248 pages. The handwriting on the inside cover, careful, small print, clearly not dictated to anyone, said only, I looked for an error. I couldn't find one. She didn't file that part. No surcharge applied. Some things, she decided, were outside the standard fee schedule entirely.